Hey babies! How you doing? Again, the first thing you need to do is send me copies of your 10 sketches, or go over 10 sketches. Today we're going to talk about how to analyze a play, going through and looking through the divisions of the play, trying to figure out the structure of the play, that sort of thing. It is dealing with the text. That's all we're going to do, is just go through the text. We're not going to worry about outcome at all. All we're going to worry about is the things that are in the text that we're going to need to fill out, or that our design needs to have the answers for. Yes? So, the first part of analyzing the play is figuring out the divisions of the play. Every play is going to have some part of the play that is going to be exposition, where you're finding out who's who and what's what. Sometimes it's very short. If you're doing Oedipus Rex, you have the prophet come out, the priest comes out and says, "Oedipus our king," and then he tells them, "We've got a problem." So that's it. All you got, that was exposition, is that whoever he just talked to is Oedipus. That's all you know. And then he's going to tell you what the conflict is. Yes? Some plays, especially mysteries, where it's about who did it, the exposition can be 3/4 of the play. If you're watching Sixth Sense, for those of you who know the movie Sixth Sense, you are an hour and a half into the play, or into the movie, before you know what you're even looking at. Again, not to ruin it for you, but there's a moment in the movie where the woman's or wedding ring hits the floor. If you've seen it. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. An hour and a half into the movie, suddenly the ring hits the floor, and you're like, "Oh my God, nothing is as I thought it was." So that's the whole point of the mystery, is who's who and what's what. So the exposition can shift, but once you have figured out what conflict is, typically that's called the point of attack. The point of attack is where you're introduced to the conflict. Oedipus, we're starving. Why is God making us starve? That's the conflict. Why, God, why are you making us starve? Because somebody killed Laius. Well, who the hell killed Laius? All right, so that's the conflict. We got to find who killed Laius, and as it turns out, not to ruin it for you, but Oedipus is the person who did it, which is ironic. But we'll talk about irony another day. But you have the point of attack is where you're introduced to conflict, and after that point you have what's typically called the rising action. Now, let me just tell you, if you could care less who killed Laius, this could be a long play. Hopefully, whatever the point of conflict is something that sparks an interest in the audience. It's something that they want to discover or learn or find out about, yes? But as a set designer, you need to make sure that when the point of attack or the point of conflict is introduced, that is designed to be audible. It needs to be in a down center or in a very important place in the design, so that everyone can understand what in the world is going on. There are times when you can be less dominant, but you definitely need to understand that when we change from exposition to rising action, that point of attack, that needs to be audible. That needs to be something that's special and heard. The next most important moment, I would say the most important moment in the play, is the climax. Yes? That is the reversal. That is the discovery, where we find out who killed Laius, that Oedipus killed Laius. Oh my God, that was so quick. Where we discover the resolution to the conflict, whatever it is. That's where the peace treaty is signed, where the lovers kiss, whatever it is. That's the climax of the play, yes? And then everything after the climax is the falling action. So the two major points of focus, well, I'm gonna say three major points of focus: the beginning, and of course of Oedipus, the beginning is the introduction of the conflict, so that doubles that up. But you have the beginning, where you're very focused on the play. I would say the first 5 minutes of a play, you have to be able to, the audience decides whether they can see and hear the play. And so again, you need to make sure that everyone is visible, that everyone is audible. Then you have to focus again on the point of conflict. Yes, and then the next most important point of focus is the climax, and then the resolution, the denouement, the end of the play, where you have the final look of the play. I would say those are the four most important moments as a designer that you can design for. It's easy to figure out how the play looks at the beginning. It's easy to figure out how the play wants to look at the point of attack, and it's easy to figure out how the play wants to look at the climax, and it's easy to know how the play wants to look at the finish, the finale. how the dead person dies, or how, whatever the final look of the play is. Typically, those are the most important moments in the play, yes? Now, there are several ways to analyze a play. One is on the structure, as we just did. We went through, we talked about how the play begins, ends, the process of the play. Another is to go through and analyze the characters in the play. Some plays are about character and the development of character, the change of character, or the flaw of the character. And this again is about a character's flaw. Analyzing the characters, who's rich, who's poor, who's happy, who's sad, all those things can be used to analyze a script and to decide who the most important characters are, and to, again, whose environment is whose. One of the things that I always, in my life, I'll just use my life. Whenever we walk into my grandfather's house, there's a chair in the room my grandfather sits in. And even if my grandfather's not in the room, nobody in the family sits in that chair, because that's my grandfather's chair. And if we have a guest over and they accidentally sit in grandfather's chair, it's like, ooh, do we move them? But as soon as my grandfather walks in, it's obvious to everyone, including the person sitting in the chair, that's sitting in grandfather's chair. So who owns the environment? Who possesses this world? Who's in charge? Yes, those are often very important things to know, because it'll suggest color, it'll suggest pattern, it'll suggest things like that relate to the audience, that can relate to the costumes, so that you can help to give the idea of what characters are important. The theme of the play could have a great deal of impact on the design. If it's comedy, if it's a tragedy, if it's a melodrama, if it's happy, if it's sad, if it's morose, if it's scary. If you're doing a mystery, if you're doing Dracula and everything is bright and shiny, I would say that's the wrong way to do Dracula. Dracula needs to be full of gargoyle-y things and scary things, and things that when the lightning happens reveal themselves and that sort of stuff. You gotta have little windows, Gothic design pieces, that sort of stuff. So again, the theme can be another way to analyze a script. The symbols in the play can be used to analyze the script. Important symbols, if the ocean, for instance, might be an important symbol, or flowers might be an important symbol. Whatever it is that's recurring images within the play. In Doll's House, I would say the fact that she's a caged animal could be important. And so having bars on the windows, or things that look like bars but aren't necessarily bars, wrought iron things, or lots of birds in cages, just lots of little things that can help augment the symbols that are in the play, yes? Another way to analyze a script is with the mood of the piece. If it's happy, if it's sad, if it's, laissez-faire, yes? If it's loving, if it's about a bunch of lovers, etc. If it's about, you get the sense. Whatever the mood of the play is. Now, another way to analyze the play, for realistic plays especially, or to just expose the given circumstances. If you're doing a realistic play in a realistic time period, the character, all those other things we talked about, might be too much of a stylistic statement, and so you might just go with pure realism. And the thing about that is that in often cases when you're doing pure realism, there's a separation between the character and the environment, because the character hasn't found a way to fit into their environment just yet. So for plays that have that as their sort of driving force, that type of approach can really work, because the character doesn't seem to fit into whatever the rest of the world is. There are people who are lost. There are people who are trying to find themselves, and the problem is that they are in a different world. Yes, and so that, for example, can be a way to deal with, approach that. Another last one of the 7 I'm going to give you today is to investigate the style of the piece. When you have, especially when you're doing things like dance or opera, that have very strong stylistic statements about the music that they're playing along with, that sort of thing, you can augment those sort of, or recur those images that are in the music, or the sounds that are in the music in your images that are on the play, yes? So again, those are just 7 different ways you can analyze a script. Again, here's a little video talking about how to go through literarily and analyze a script using the techniques of Stanislavski.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to Drama Made Simple. On this channel we do all things acting, exercises for beginners, exercises to do by yourself, exercises to do at home. So if that's your thing, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell down below so you know when we have new videos coming out that'll be for you. This is a series on Stanislavski's system, so if you want to check out any other videos from that series, I will have that linked down below. So today we're going to be talking about how to read and analyse a play that you're performing in, using elements of Stanislavski's system. So first let's discuss the first reading of the play. In Stanislavski's book, Creating a Role, he talks about how important it is to really make a ceremony of the first reading of a play. If you're, dipping in and out of reading it, or starting and stopping, or you're distracted while you're reading it, you're not really going to be able to take in all that the play has to offer. So it's really important that the first time you read a play, you do so in a quiet environment where you won't be disturbed and you're able to read it in full. But at the same time, it shouldn't be too comfortable that you can't, concentrate on reading the play and really focus on what's going on. So it should be like a good mix of quiet and comfortable and concentrated or focused environment. So maybe that's somewhere like a library for you, that every time you get a new script to read for the first time, you head down to the library and really be able to give yourself the time to really take in all of the play. If you think about any film performance or any play you've seen or a song you've heard that really spoke to you, so if you just think about something that has had a big impact on you, think about how it would be if for the first time that you had heard it or saw it, that you were pressing pause, going off, having coffee, coming back, watching it again, or you were distracted like on your phone or whatever the first time you were watching it. Think about whether that film or song would have had the same impact on you had you been watching it in a distracted environment versus if you were sitting down in the cinema completely focused on the movie or whatever it was. That's why it's so important to really make a ritual or a ceremony of reading the play for the first time. Even if you've had previous contact with the play, perhaps you've seen it before, or you read it as part of school or have read part of it, it's still important that the first time you're reading it, knowing that you're going to be playing a certain role, that you really give yourself the time to read it undisturbed and in full. So after you've read the play for the first time, or maybe a couple of times to really let it sink in, then it's time to start analysing the play. So as part of Stanislavski's system, it's often referred to as round the table analysis because it can be done by a group of actors who are going to be preparing a play, that they can sort of share the work of doing the analysis as a group. But this can also be done by yourself. There's no need to involve other actors because sometimes you might be just preparing part of a play like a monologue, and you might want to still do all of the preparation so that you have a full rounded experience preparing the monologue piece. So basically there are 7 planes that you want to be analysing the play through, and if you're doing this as a group, you can sort of assign each plane to a different person and have them be responsible for it, so that when you're all reading the play together, someone will be taking care of each plane and that they'll be more responsible for sort of filling out all of the details of that one. And then at the end, all together, you'll have the full 7 planes. But if you're doing this by yourself, you could either sort of make a big table with each of the planes, and as you're reading through the play, each time a part of the play resonates with a different plane, you would, stop and write down whatever it is into each of those headings. Or if that's too sort of complicated for you, if you're not very good at multitasking, you might want to read the play a different time for each plane and just only think about that one for each reading. So the first plane is the external plane, and that is the facts of the play, all of the events that occur, the general plot and the form. So whether it might be a linear or fragmented play, so do the events happen in order? And do they follow like a timeline where it's quite organised, or is it chopping and changing between different times? Is that into the future, into the past, and all this? And as well, like how long the action takes place over. So is it all happening in one day? Is it happening in a week? Does it happen over years? All of those things will be important. And then basically everything that happens. So the events can include every major event that happens in the play. And then we have the plane of the social situation, and that can be subdivided into 3 categories. So the character's class, their nationality, and the time in history. These will all have a strong influence on the characters and the type of things that they can do, as well as the events that might happen in the play, and the development of characters, and the sorts of situations that the characters will be in will be heavily dependent on their social situation. And that's the one that you probably will need to do a fair bit of research on yourself. So you might be given the fact that it's set in a certain town in America in the 1960s or something, but you'll have to look up on the internet what was going on there at that time. And those kind of facts that you learn yourself will be interesting extra parts that you can add on to your analysis. Then there is the literary plane, and that will have to do with how the playwright decided to stamp the play with his own words in terms of what the style of the play was, and whether there was any sort of theatre movement going on at the time, and the sort of ideas that would have been associated with that theatre movement, and how that would have influenced how the play was written. And then there is the aesthetic plane, which is all things to do with the scenery and production of the play. So the staging, the lighting, the props, and all of those things will all have to do with the aesthetic plane. Then there is the psychological plane, which has to do with all of the inner actions that occur for characters, the inner characterizations that they have, as well as the emotions and feelings of the characters and their objectives. And similarly, there's the physical plane, which involves the physical characterizations of the characters and how their psychological objectives are turned into physical actions. And finally, there is the plane of personal and creative feelings. So this is individual to every actor, and it'll be all of the things that excited you or caused you to think more, or perhaps some way the part was written that you then thought, oh, maybe it could be this way. And that'll be individual to you. That is the part that means that when you play a part, it's different to how somebody else does. Whereas the previously mentioned psychological and physical planes, they're all of the things that the actual playwright has told you about the character's psyche and physical state, whereas the personal attributes that you give them will all fall into the personal and creative feelings plane. So I guess now you're wondering, what do you do with all of this information once you've compiled it all? And that would be to transcribe it into the given circumstances of the play. So in An Actor Prepares, Stanislavski describes the given circumstances as the story of the play, the facts, the events, the time and the place, the conditions of life for the character, the interpretation of the actor and directors, and all of the details to do with production. So you can see that all of the things you compiled in the external plane will be used for the given circumstances, because they'll be all of the story of the play and the events and everything like that. That will all be from the external plane. And then what is mentioned about the conditions of life for the characters, that will be to do with the plane of the social situation, which you previously described as their character's class, nationality, and the history, and how that will influence the kind of situations the characters can be in and how they might react to different situations. And then the actor and director's interpretations as part of the given circumstances will be to do with the plane of personal and creative feelings, as well as all of the aspects of stage design and production. They will all be to do with the aesthetic plane in some regard. And then what do you do once you have the given circumstances all sorted out? Well, the thing to do then is to imagine yourself in these circumstances and say, what would I do if I was in this situation? And taking into account all you know about the character's life, their social situation, their background, and seeing, okay, in this new situation in the play, based on everything I know from doing this analysis, what would I do in this situation? And that will lead you to be able to create real, true actions and objectives and emotions on stage. So I hope you liked this video. I hope it was helpful. If you have any questions, please ask in the comments below, because I will be happy to talk more about this. The next video will be all about how to break down a scene using elements of Stanislavski's system. So if you want to see that video, do make sure that you subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you know when it's up. And I will see you guys in the next video.
Cool. All right, so I'm going to give you a handout with different ways of analyzing the script for Lost in Yonkers. Again, you're going to have this back to me in the next week or so. One of the things, again, this is your answers to these questions, and you're going to find that when you're working as a team, you're going to have directors that may or may not have similar answers. And so things that are given that have to be, and then there are things that are sort of wishy-washy. For instance, nothing ever says what color the wall is necessarily, but you can have an opinion about it. There's some suggestions that there's some pictures of ants and on the tables and that sort of thing. So those sort of things need to be around. There's definitely a window that they look out of to see the guys that are chasing the uncle. There's got to be a bathroom somewhere on stage that the uncle goes to shave in. So where is that on stage? Yes. So having just a list of answers to these questions can give you or start guiding you towards the design decisions that you're going to have to make. It also helps to have done some research on past productions to look at how other people solve problems in the play. Not that you're necessarily dedicated to their solutions, but it might be that you find some nice solutions. I'm going to give you, Cody's going to show you here real quick. These are from a totally different play. This is from Death of the Salesman. But here are 3 different interpretations of the same play, obviously done different environments. But one is a very impressionistic version where you have the impression of the house, where you have the outline of the house. Again, the table is a little bit larger. The kitchen is the most dominant part, but you still see the bedroom upstairs. You have a front door that's there. But again, you can see the various elements, the bedroom and that sort of stuff upstairs. But then the next version is what I'm called expressionistic, where the buildings are actually leaning in toward Willie Loman and his family. They are sort of imposing their aura on the house. And again, you still have the kitchen, you still have upstairs for the boys, but you don't necessarily have front doors, you don't necessarily have all the elements that you might have in that first production, which was more impressionistic. And then you have the last one, which is I'm gonna call surrealistic, where again, you're having the lighting design do a lot of the work about interior, exterior, but then you have things like cars floating in the air and houses floating in the air and God knows what's going on, but it's much more of a dream interpretation of the play itself. So again, these are all just different styles, different approaches towards plays. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to do any of these. It can certainly be, Lost in Yonkers can certainly be a very realistic production, but just to give you some examples of different ways you might go as a set designer in your interpretation of the play. Cool? Cool. We'll see you next time.